So then, just for us to kick off, let me ask you one personal question that I care a lot about. So, quite a few years ago, when you started Make Tutorial, which is the original WalkMe, did you imagine that it will become a 700-person company in almost every continent in the world, a unicorn, just about to IPO? Was that something that you actually imagined?
No need to be close to me too. So first, thank you for the kind word. Some people say I'm too direct. You call it honesty. So two things. One, actually, yesterday I saw on my LinkedIn that I had an 8-year anniversary with WalkMe. But we started the company in 2012. I just changed it the first day we actually started coding it. We never had an idea how big it will be, to be honest. Even when we started with selling WalkMe online for $19 a month. We thought we were gonna track some free users, convert them, and I think that then we realized how big it can be. I think that even now we realize how big it can be. Every year we see the potential. So no, we didn't even thought about the $1 billion valuation or being 700. We never aimed that far. We just wanted to build a good product.
So maybe take us for the first, time that you moved to the United States. A lot of the founders here are considering that over $1 million actually raised. When did you decide it's now time for me to pack my own things as a single guy, move across the ocean, and start somewhere where I have no network and no background?
So we raised our first $1 million in 2012, in April 2012. We got some traction, around 100 customers. And we raised another 5.5 million. Remember, we sat down. One of the VCs was Mangrove. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And Mark, the CEO of Mangrove, told me, "How old are you?" I said, 26, or turning 27. He's like, "You have a wife, you have kids?" I'm like, "No." "Okay, pack a bag and go to San Francisco." It was, I think, the second time I was in the United States. I didn't even know where it is. I knew it West Coast. And I said, fuck it, let's do it. Took a bag, literally a bag, mochila, and took one of my best friends from Jerusalem, because I was afraid to go alone. We were a tiny company back then. Landed in San Francisco in August. I didn't know one single person. It's not like now when you have all the accelerators and stuff like that. Literally, if something would happen to me, I didn't know one single person in San Francisco. And yeah, I stayed there until today. Until last week, actually, I moved to New York.
What surprised you the most when you moved there? Considering, you've been to the Israeli market before and then you moved there, what was the biggest shock?
One, the weather. I thought it would be hot, but to be honest, I thought that Tel Aviv is a tech hub, but when I got to San Francisco, I realized how big it is. Everything there is around tech, and it was huge. And I think as a B2B company, not to be in the US, it's a huge mistake. Now New York is big as well, but New York or San Francisco is a must. You can't, at least in my opinion, really grow an international company just from Israel, even though there is big successes like Wix.com, but they're in the B2C market. I do think that B2B companies must be in the US. It wouldn't work if we weren't there.
So we're trying to be very focused on specific tips, and I think a lot of people, when they consider moving to the US, sales is a pretty big thing of that. When did you actually decide that you want to have your sales leadership in the United States, and how do you start looking for a sales leader when you're an Israeli startup that is basically starting at a disadvantage in the Silicon Valley?
So to be honest, when we built our first sales team, we built it from Israel. Was US people. I don't know if you're familiar with a company called Panaya, a very successful company. We took all of their salespeople back in the days. They just built a really good model, and this is how we started. So we recruited a lot of people here to work US hours. And then we started to add people in the US that were much more expensive. And I think as we grew the US team, that I would say the biggest quick wins that they brought to us is their connections. So it was really easy to get customers with them. But I think once we crossed the 30 million in ARR, we moved the entire sales leadership into the US. When we crossed the 70, we actually splitted US from rest of world, and now we have two leaders, one in rest of world and one in the US. But we started here. It was hard, but at the end of the day, the big money came from sales leaders in the US.
So let's talk about this shift into having sales leaders. You are so involved in every possible deal. You build the products in your own hands. When do you actually, and how do you learn to take a step back and let the machine work as opposed to leading every sales cycle by yourself as a CEO?
Yeah, I think a lot of people ask me how much I'm involved in those processes, and I'm very much involved. And the reason that I'm involved is not because the machine is not working. It's because we're building a different machine every year. So we are really religious about process. And in order to scale, you need process, and you can't be involved on every deal. But as a company that reinvent itself at least a few times, and probably most of you don't even know what WalkMe is doing. Maybe just from the website, yes, we're doing bubbles on website and show users how to use websites, but it's much, much more than that. So as we reinvented ourselves, I think as a CEO, what I'm doing, I'm in the front. So we have a really good sales process that's working. We have our marketing machine converting leads, all the metrics that you need to have in order to scale. And then we see another opportunity. Then we see another use case or product or market that we can go in. And this is where I'm stepping in and reinvent it. And then we take everything. Now when we're big, if we take Omer, for example, and my turn to talk about you, the company decided, for example, that we are going to be very aggressive in the small and mid-market business because the company had a big shift into the enterprise. So we brought Omer to basically build a company within a company and on P&L. They're sitting in Raleigh. And this is what we saw is that if we won't bring our best people, then we will always lose because it wasn't a focus for the company. So yeah, we're involved all the time.
So obviously there are a lot of things that you have done well. Can you admit about 2 or 3 mistakes that you've made in the last 8 years, according to LinkedIn, that you've been at WalkMe?
Wow.
Sorry.
A lot of mistakes. I think that I would start with HR. We really underestimate how important it is to invest in HR. Actually, we didn't have a proper HR, I would say, at least 2 years ago. We just thought that, just use your common sense, be a human being, and everything will work out. So I think that is one big mistake. I think the second mistake that we did was when we invest and open new offices, connecting everyone to be and believe in the same values. This is something, and I would admit that we mocked I thought like, what, we're gonna put in our wall a list of values? That's ridiculous. Like, are we stupid? We need a list of values. But now we understand that yes, we do. And making sure that everybody in the company feels a part of the company, it's not trivial, especially when I think when we grew over 200 people. So I would say both are related to HR, but those are the biggest mistake that we did, that we're still paying a lot of debt. So there is, I'm sure everybody knows technical debt that you repay. So we had a big HR debt that we needed to repay.
So you talked and you kind of mentioned the fact that it's a company that is split across multiple locations. And we started this morning with Yasmin and Noam talking about the fact that it's a very optimistic note. We're all screwed by definition because we're probably going to have our product and dev team here and then sales and marketing, etc. in the US. That's where WalkMe is. How do you keep a culture across those offices? And also, how do you keep a relationship with a co-founder that is here when you're 10 hours away in San Francisco? How does that even work?
Yeah, so this is probably will be our biggest pain point today. If you will ask WalkMe employees in the US what's their number one issue, they will tell you communication with product. So what we're starting to do or started to do is, one, have basically people from each department in the US. The Israeli office is working more or less US hours, East Coast. They are available every end of quarter. We're flying people to San Francisco, you know it, and we're trying to make that connection. We're using every channel that we can, Slack, email, WalkMe, and a lot of other ways to communicate with the employees. But yeah, it's a challenge. I don't think there is a magic trick to do it. I would say that if I wasn't there is no way on earth that it will be successful. So if you think that, let's say you're two founders or three, that you can stay here, hire someone there that will manage everything for you, it won't work. Like, if I can give you one advice, don't do it. Someone needs to be there and basically bridge the gap between the Israeli culture and the Israeli centricity to the US. It's a must.
And so when you start recruiting there, do you recruit Israelis in the United States? Do you recruit Americans in Israel? How do you bridge that gap? How do you physically do it?
Yeah, so I think one of our biggest challenges today is to recruit Israelis. So we are now 700 people, growing to 1,000 people. How many Israeli talent we can bring? There is not a lot of companies that we can go and hire from. Think about it. Maybe every time we want to recruit a C-level or a VP, and we're talking with the recruiting or the headhunter, there is maybe 20 companies, Israelis, that someone did it already and we can take someone from there. For example, now we're hiring for a CFO. How many Israeli CFOs been in a B2B SaaS companies, took them public, that can come now to WalkMe and help us go public? Not a lot. So as we grew, most of the talent that we bring are Americans. And to hire Americans for us as Israelis is tough, because it's really hard to, they all talk a big game. I think they learn how to interview from second grade or something. So how do you know who exactly, we call it empty suit, who is not an empty suit, who is coming to work, who you can call at 1 a.m. and tell them jump on a phone call? So that was a big challenge. So yeah, we hired US, mostly US, and I think that most of the people in US today in WalkMe are from the US, but we have these islands when we or relocated people or we hired Israeli in the valley, and I think that one of the biggest advantage of Silicon Valley is that there is a lot of Israelis that worked in amazing companies and did amazing things that would be happy to come and work for an Israeli company that's in the Valley. So I would say both, but mainly US people.
So let's take that to fundraising. You had an Israeli investor, and then you got Insight Ventures, which is actually an American fund that invested in WalkMe. What are the differences between those two investors, and how did you manage to adjust yourself and your own management of the company with this kind of American investor coming in?
So we have Insight Ventures and we have Scale Ventures and Greenspring. Those are the three US VCs that invested in WalkMe. And on the Israeli side, we have Giza, Gemini, and I would say Mangrove is European. If I would need to do it all over again, I would take money only from US and not from Israel. Angels is something else. Angels are angels. Always nice. But I think that Israeli VCs, at least for us, at the beginning, it was very difficult. When we took money from US VCs, one, we were their smallest investment, so they didn't really care. Take 10 million, let's talk next year. What? So I think in their mind, they're much more aggressive. They don't think on the short term. They think about how you can be big. They never talked about, at least with us, about being profitable or being cash flow positive. It's about how fast you can grow. Does the machine work? And if the machine works, how we can put more gas into the machine. At least in the Israeli VCs, we didn't get this back. Now we're getting after we were successful. But when you need to take the risk and maybe put more money, that was really hard. Insight Ventures, when came the last, that's a different game. There are part private equity, part growth. So different ball game. They invest in you when you're over 10 million in ARR. So it's a different game. But I would say at the beginning, Scale Venture Partners was by far, at least from what I know, the best partner that we had in order to scale the business. And if I would have another startup, I will 100% will raise money only from the US. Of course, it's a private case. So I'm not saying that all Israeli VCs are not good, and I know that now there is new VCs that are really, really good in Israel and trying to replicate that model.
By the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'd love to get some of those in as well. Oh, wow. Yes, please.
Hey, I'm Val, co-founder of Adika. I'm literally asking for a friend. So if the business is not focused on the US, let's say it's focused on Europe, do you still see the rationale of trying to make sales? There is an opportunity to make sales also in the US, but they went into the European market and they're very strong over there. Should they maintain their presence in Europe and try to raise in Europe, or have another leg in the US and try to raise in the US? What's your perspective?
Yeah, so we operate in Europe too. So even in Europe, we have people in Europe. Another mistake that Israeli has, that Europe is one country, but it's a lot of small countries, so it's different between France and Germany and England, and now we have office in each one of those countries, different mentality and different everything. I don't know exactly, your friend, exactly what the topic, but if it's B2B, US is the biggest market. US are early adopters. It's much easier to do business with US companies. GDPR, for example, right? Europe is much more strict. So for us, being in the US still is the biggest market. So I would say go to the US if you want to grow fast.
So I want to ask more about the product and the business unit. So you said before that there is a kind of separation between like SMBs versus enterprises. What is like the tactics, if you do like flow touch versus direct sales, what is the role of each one of you?
Yeah, so product-wise, we have 4 units just in the product. mobile, web, desktop, and analytics. That's the way we develop the product. The way we sell the product, we have small business, mid-market enterprise, and strategic. And what we found out is that each one have a really different motion, different buyers, different marketing, and so on. So we adapt to it. So we had different motion for each one of them. What happened is that no one cared about the smaller segments because they bring less money and they're less profitable. So everybody was focused on the big companies. So for example, if we need to decide between doing a feature to Bank of America or doing a feature to a startup, we will always choose Bank of America, which will give startups the notion or the feeling that we're neglecting them. So they will go to a competitor. And then we saw a few really interesting use cases. One is Zoom, that is about to go public. And what happened with Zoom is that they took the market really quickly. So they killed blue jeans, if you're familiar with blue jeans, and they're taking a lot of market share from WebEx. And the reason is that they started from the bottom. They took all the early and got stronger and stronger and stronger. So we can't afford it. And we want to control the market at all times. But suddenly in a company that one is growing, how you prioritized. So we always say that structure is for human beings to work better. So we decided to take a structure, put a lot of emphasis on the small market, measure it differently, bringing a head for that. And then they don't even know that they're working with a company. So when now when a request from Bank of America comes, we're not even competing in the same pool. It's their own company, and they're running and they're building different, almost different everything. Yeah, even to the board, we report it in 2 columns. The core business. So, Omer, maybe you can talk about your messaging.
It's a market leader, and I'll be quick because it's Dan's show, but it's the idea as a market leader is that you need to serve different parts of the market. The buyer is different, the messaging is different, the pricing is different, and we don't want to cannibalize, the big pool and the Bank of America. And so the idea was, if you have a different use case and a different buyer, let's create a different area and a center of excellence that we put in Raleigh, North Carolina, where those customers are the center. Because if you have a CSM, a customer success manager, that needs to manage Bank of America as well as a mom and pop place, a company of 50 employees, they'll always neglect that little customer. Then will that go to the competition? The competition will have 500 of those and start actually compete on the mid-size and then the enterprise. And so the idea is really to create a different playbook that is much more self-sufficient, self-service, quick sales cycles, higher ratio of accounts per CSM, different messaging, and now even a different branding, WalkMe Growth versus WalkMe, to really report that differently and also not hurt the company. Because if you think about the churn of SMBs, a lot of SMBs unfortunately close. We don't want that to hit other segments, so we want to measure it differently and treat it as sort of a company within a company. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any more questions? So, yes.
You mentioned HR there before. Can you maybe describe what kind of issues arise from the HR?
Yeah. So one is employee churn. That was, and again, it wasn't in all the regions, but employee churn is, I think, one of the hardest things, especially when you try to grow. People are leaving, you need to replace them. It's really, really hard. So that was one issue. I would say the second issue is productivity. I don't know if you ever work in a corporate, but you want that your employees will be engaged, and you want your employees to have RAL, right? You want them to push hard, and as you grow, suddenly you feel that it's declining. So you're not like you used to be. And there was times that we felt that we are like in the front, shouting, "Let's go," and everybody else like, what they're talking about, right? Like, we're tired. So you feel those type of things. Of course, it's not everywhere, but you start to see those pockets, and when you actually dig in, you find a lot of things, right? Think about it, that when we grow from 300 to 600 people, half of the company, more than half, because when you go from 300 to 600, you're not adding 300 because some people are leaving. So more than 50% of the company was less than 1 year in the company. They don't even know each other. And now you're trying to scale, and you raise your targets, and you have more ambitions, but no one even know what's going on. So you see when the culture is not tight, and people are not engaged, you quickly will see it in the business results too. The biggest mistake is to listen to me and do exactly what I did. Each one has their own company. You know your company better than anyone else. So if I took a mochila and went, doesn't mean that you need to take a mochila and go there. You need to know your business. I would say that's number one. The fact that another company hired salespeople in the US doesn't mean that it will work for you. And I see a lot of founders thinking that there is a checklist. I'm moving to San Francisco, I'm taking money from a US VC, I will hire 5 people that are from the US and I will be successful. It's not always working like that. That's not the reality. The reality that there is always challenges. So I would say really know how to take those feedbacks and apply it to your own company. I would say that's number one. Number two, don't be afraid to fail. I told one of the people here today, we in WalkMe had moments that I thought that we're going to close the company. I know that almost every company has it, but it's true. We almost closed the company. We were like have 3 or 4 months run rate in the bank. It's happened all the time. So I think especially when you go to the US and your burn rate is going up because everything is much more expensive, if you think that what you're doing is the right thing, and if you really believe that your business is going to the right direction, I would say continue to invest and don't be afraid, especially you're in unfamiliar territory. But yeah, I think that there is no way to succeed, but there is no way to be successful if you're staying here. You must be there. And even though that a lot of people say, I can go, I can fly there every week or something like that, it's not the same. When you're there, you're available, you know people, you learn from people, you see other companies. Think about it, like today, WalkMe, for example, in Israel, we're a medium-sized company, there is not a lot of unicorns. We are nothing in California, in San Francisco. We're a tiny company. So think about how many founders I'm learning from every day. Just in our building, there is amazing companies. So I can just push another floor and go and talk with another CEO. So I would say go for sure, just don't be afraid how expensive it is.
More questions before we go on? So I have another one from my end. How did your day-to-day change between 7 years ago when you were here and today when you're a CEO of a 700-person company? How does it look like? Does it look any different at all?
Yeah, so I started in the R&D team. So most of my days was product and R&D. Now, not so much. As I said, it's HR and other stuff. So first I'm starting my morning very, very early. So I'm waking up at 6:30 a.m. every day to get as much time that I can with Israel. Two, I'm mostly focused on the business aspect. So we want to go public, so everything that is related to finance, sales, less about the product, I would say. Two, I think that when we were in Israel, just all of us, you could fix everything. You have a problem, you go to the kitchen, everybody's talking 5 minutes, you go on. And now, when we're there, you have a problem, everybody sleeps, you need to wait a day, and then you go on. So we adjust our schedule to work better, I would say. But yeah, it's completely different, especially that when I'm looking at the life of WalkMe, I was 6+ years in the US and only 1 year in Israel, so yeah.
There's a very famous story that somebody here in the audience remembered and even just texted me about you actually stalking the first customers to try and land them as WalkMe customers. Yeah. Would you mind sharing that?
Sure. So we're still doing it. So there is private detectors here. So yeah, I think that we have a saying in WalkMe. It says no excuses. So I can tell you a few stories. The one, our first big customers was eBay, and we did everything in order to get them. So it started with going to one of their VPs in a restaurant and basically force them to see a demo and get us the intros. Okay, we actually signed our biggest deal ever 2 weeks ago, and that's a really good story. The company name is Christus Health. It's an insurance company in the US, and the first deal was in Q3 2018, and now was the expansion, and they were about to sign, then the DM was going somewhere. We literally, you remember Richard Scott, sent the AE to fly there and stay there and tell them every day, I'm in the lobby, I'm waiting for the contract to be signed, and we got the deal. There is no excuses. You need to sign it, so you will sign it. Of course that they want the product, so that's the only assumption. But a lot of the time, people are giving up super quickly. At the end of the day, it's all about humans. And the minute they saw the dedication and the fact that the guy was in the lobby, they signed it. And they were very, very, very happy with WalkMe. And now they expanded, and they're one of our biggest customers. Another story that I can tell you, we were in a customer, and we knew that they will try to push it for next quarter. So the AE left his phone in the office of the customer just to come back the next day to take the phone and make sure that everything is working. So I think that on the sales aspect, we're doing a lot of interesting stuff. Actually, there is a book, Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About the Hard Things. And there is a story there that they're waiting for the guy at the airport, and they know exactly what he likes, and they bought the company that he looked at. So one, I recommend to read this book, a really good book. Two, as I said, no excuses. I wish, and now we're changing it even in the customer success, to be as bold as in the sales. Someone is not answering you, make sure you follow them on Facebook, talk with them on LinkedIn. Again, we're really, really, really brought the Israeli chutzpah to the Silicon Valley, and it worked. It worked really well, and I think that, yeah, we have stories when it didn't work that well.
Would you mind sharing them? Was there ever a time where it was like too much, somebody was like, yo, you and your chutzpah, go away?
Yeah. There was some times that people pushed back and said, hey, that's too much, or you're crossing the line. But they signed anyway. Right? all we need is them to be engaged, right? So they can go and say, hey, Omer called me 5 times, and that's insane. And then I will jump on a call and say sorry, and it will never happen again. And that's fine, right? So you need to keep them engaged at all time. I really think that, again, we have a lot of things to improve in WalkMe. I would say that our marketing and sales team are one of the best. And when we compare the metrics and their conversion rate and how they operate and everything, it's really, really, really best in class. And I think we were able to combine the Israeli culture with the American knowledge and professionalism to create such a good machine.
Any more questions here? Yes.
You created a great sales organization also in Israel, as far as I know. And still you were very big advocate of moving the sales and the entire management to the States. I'm not sure I understand like why. What happened that made you be so strict about that?
Yeah, so we didn't move all the management. We're split. We moved the sales management at the beginning to the US. So at the end of the day, product and R&D are still in Israel. We have an amazing sales team in Israel too that's selling, and we have our marketing is almost entirely in Israel, and they're doing a fantastic job. I think that what we did in the US is two things. One, access to money and investors. I don't know, maybe Yasmin can keep me honest here, but I don't think that US VCs will give you money if you're not there. Like, it's not like, hey, write me a $50 million check, yeah, bye. I'm in Israel. They want to see some presence. So one, access to money. Two, access to customers. So when we saw that most of our customers are there, and then Fortune 500 will be our target, or let's call it even Fortune 2000 is our target, they're sitting there. So they want to talk with people there. And I think one of the... You ever sold to Israeli?
So I'm sure that your sales team in Israel...
No. So I can tell you that if our people in going on a call with a US company and it's Israeli on the other side, they will immediately move it to Israeli. Because then Israeli come on the phone, hey, מה המצב? איפה שירתת? 2-3 sentences, and it's amazing icebreaker. That's what they do. That's something that will be really hard for Israelis to do. So when they go on a call, it's immediately talking about the sport events, and then they're talking about where they went to college, and so on and so on and so on. They know each other. They worked. He sold him one time in the past when he worked in Salesforce or Oracle or whatever. So as the organization grew there, their managers should be there, and their manager should be there, and their manager should be there. So the entire organization started to build around the US. Now, when we have offices in Australia, for example, we're bringing people in Australia. And if Australia will be such a big market in the US, I would tell you, go to Australia. So as long as the US is still the biggest market in the world, if you want to succeed there fast, in a B2B enterprise sale, go to the US.
Yes.
At the beginning of the talk, you said that you can have company values on board very early on. What are your company's values?
Good question. So we have few values. One is meritocracy, so merit-based. We really believe in it. In WalkMe, you don't need to go to college or school or be in Ivy League. You need to bring your A game. So I think that's one of the most important values. We have a value that probably most of the company have, but we changed it a bit. So work hard, play hard. We changed it to work smart. And the idea is that we don't want people to work hard. If I see someone working over the weekend, it's not a good sign. It means that they didn't get their stuff done over the week, so something is wrong. So you need to work smart and always play hard. But work smart is one of that. I think that being honest and being direct, again, it's not just saying the values, it's live up to those values, which is the hardest thing, because you can always say, let's be honest, let's be open, but really be honest and really be open. It's something that is hard. I can tell you that, especially with the US, it was hard to be that direct. Here, let's say a designer show you something and you can like, it's ugly, don't like it. There, they can quit if you tell them something like that. Oz probably know it better than me. And then me, being me, going there and like, disgusting, it's ugly. Took some time for them to digest the Israeliness, but that's a value. I will tell you the truth. It will get better. At the end of the day, it's my opinion only. Maybe you think it's beautiful. You ask my opinion, I'm telling it to you. So I would say those are the top three in my mind. But the first one, about being merit-based, I think super important. People see other people, especially when you're in a big organization. And if someone is getting promoted and they're not good, or someone is getting promoted just because he's graduated in Harvard or something like that, that's not our values. People will get promoted because they're good and they work smart, and they, at the end of the day, affecting the business. That's what we want people to do.
So somewhat related to that, as you are a CEO who stayed from the early stages and you're then from Jerusalem, the company is now growing and you're bringing a CFO that maybe did an IPO before and a VP sales who maybe worked at 3 other companies before. How do you as a manager manage people who have done that job so many times before and still adding value as a CEO? How do you change your own management in light of that?
That's a really good question. We're bringing people, or we're trying to bring people that will tell us what to do. If I need to tell my VP sales how to sell, we're gonna tank for sure. If I'm gonna tell my CFO how to run our finance team, we're probably gonna fail because I never run the finance team and I never sold stuff, at least until WalkMe. So in my one-on-ones with them, usually it will be, how can I help you? And they using me usually to help them navigate in the organization. And I feel that me and my co-founder are the glue. So it's a new VP sales, and he needs something from product, but he never talked with them, or he talked with them and he doesn't know exactly how to say it. Usually this is where I will help them and help them achieve their KPIs. But they will usually set the KPIs, and they will usually navigate us to where we need to be. Another thing that I'm doing, now we know exactly, and it really depends on which stage you are in the company, but always use benchmarks, okay? And I think those type of conferences are the perfect place because you see companies that are similar to you. Now our benchmark is company that recently went public. So if it's companies like Zuora or Smartsheet and so on, we're benchmarking ourselves to them. And based on that, we're setting the company KPIs, right? Trends are changing. 3 years ago, you could go public and lose 200 million a year. And now you need to be somewhat cash flow positive, or at least going to that path. So usually I would say, we call it the North Star, right? We have like 3 metrics. I can share it if you want. So in our size, we're trying to grow 50% year over year in ARR. And we have 2 other metrics, gross sales efficiency and net sales efficiency. And we're trying that our gross sales efficiency will be at 0.8, and our net sales efficiency will be greater than 0.6. So those are the 3 metrics that we're giving to the entire company. And then based on that, the sales team, the product team, everybody is building their plans. And it wasn't always our 3 metrics. 2 years ago, we tried to grow 150%, and gross sales efficiency could be 0.5. By the way, gross sales efficiency is how much money you spend on sales and marketing divided by your ARR, or the opposite.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Anybody want to ask anything? So yes.
Is there like a personal price to move to do what you did? In any other point you consider to go back? Like 2 years, you've been successful, why not just jump?
Yeah, so huge personal price just by being a founder of a company, regardless of the relocation. Now, regarding the relocation, yes, huge personal price. I'm an only child. I told my mother that I will go for 4 years, already 6. So, yes, I barely see the family and friends like I used to, even though I'm coming to Israel a lot. So on that point of view, there is a big price. As Omer said, when I moved, I was single. I had a girlfriend that was not Jewish and not Israeli. My mom wanted to kill me. Regardless to that, now I'm married with an Israeli, so at least that worked. And I tried to move back to Israel. I couldn't. The business was growing, and I was trying to be here for 2 or 3 weeks, and you just feel you're missing all the action. So I needed to go back. I can tell you that now, when we're more stable, I moved to New York only for a week, so you can talk with me in 2-3 months and I will tell you how it is. But now we have a big operation in the East Coast, so we're around 150 people in the East Coast, and I think that will be the bridge, because the East Coast, and by the way, I would advise you to try New York before you're trying San Francisco if it's hard for you with family and stuff like that, because New York, you have 7 flights a day and so on and so on, but the heart of B2B enterprise still is Silicon Valley by far, but yeah, big personal price, big, at least for me.
So one very, very last question. We start by saying that 7 years ago or 8 years ago, you didn't think that WalkMe will be where it is today. Where do you envision WalkMe 10 years from now?
I will do 3 years from now. Hard
Done.
to envision 10. I think we're going to be public even before 3 years, and I think that WalkMe can be one of the biggest enterprise companies from Israel. Our market potential is huge. We are now crossing 100 million in ARR. I think we can get to $1 billion in revenue in a few years. It's hard. There is not a lot of Israeli companies that ever got there that far. Checkpoint, and there is a few others. But that's our goal. We want to have $1 billion in revenue.
Thank you very much, Dan Adika.